morning, world. This is Steve Rao, the host of Pod and Roku TV's World Edition. And I greet you live from the All America city of Morrisville in North Carolina, the eighth largest state in the Union. I'm going to take my headsets off real quick. Hopefully, you can hear me. So, I wanted today to begin my commentary. On this show, we talk about uh, politics, innovation, an increasingly turbulent world economically, politically. And over the next few months, we'll be talking about artificial intelligence and its impact on the world, from job loss to opportunities to be more productive, to its indoctrination into our life, and also regulation that might be needed by the United States Congress. And on August 24th, Ukraine will be celebrating their Ukraine Independence Day, and we'll be talking a little bit about the war in Ukraine on Sasha Star's show. So we welcome you to the show wherever you are in the world. I'll be here briefly today as I'm moving our son into NC State. My daughter just left to South Africa for a semester, so lots of movement in our family. And she's graduating from UNC this year. North Korea has said that Travis King, the American soldier who fled the border from South Korea in July, had defected to avoid inhuman maltreatment and racial discrimination in America's army. No comment has been made by the United States government or the Defense Department, but it is something to talk about. And speaking of Ukraine, a cargo ship left Odessa, a Ukrainian Black Sea port, after being trapped there since Russia's full-scale invasion beginning in February 2022. Last week, Ukraine announced a new corridor in the Black Sea to release merchant ships stuck in its ports, despite Russia having given no assurances of safe passage. And of course, much of the world's grain and wheat comes from Ukraine, and this is going to affect food supply. Britain's inflation rate fell to 6.8% from 7.9%, but still really high for Britain. And Poland held its biggest military parade since the end of the Cold War. The country showcased aircraft and weapons in an annual event marking a victory over the Red Army in 1920. And figure of the day is 71% of primary schools in England with girls or mixed football teams. And meanwhile, the semifinals of the World Cup goes on. I forgot to watch the end of Australia and UK. I think UK won. Great Britain will be having the finals, I think, is on the 20th. And we're going to go ahead and get started with the show. But before I begin, all eyes are on former President Trump, who once again is facing indictment by Fulton County, Georgia. We had the classified documents case in Mar-a-Lago, the insurrection case in the Capitol, the hush money case, and now the tampering of elections in the state of Georgia. If Trump is the nominee of the party, the question becomes, will he be on trial during the campaign? And if he's convicted of any of his crimes, could he be removed from office? Right now, it's not looking like he could, although there is an argument that the 14th Amendment of our Constitution could remove him from office if he is elected. But with all eyes on it right now, he's 30 points up, and does look, in my opinion as a political analyst, that Donald J. Trump will be the Republican nominee facing Joe Biden in the presidential, unless the Republicans come up with a new strategy and even at their convention can come up with the votes to nominate someone new. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much, Mark. Let's go ahead.
Definitely. And by the way, the UK did win. I know that Shaquille is probably not too happy about that, as Australia did fall 3-1 and all in that space. So yes, the UK did win that match and all along those lines. So that is some of the news that I saw. And we do have Chuck Cooper, who's out of North Carolina as well. And he is a leader here in the area, a leader in the business community. And we had talked about business news before and everything. So definitely wanted Chuck to get a chance to talk about Whitewater and some of the things that Whitewater was doing, his consulting company, and even what got him into business leadership, because I know that he is a business leader here in North Carolina. And I'm sure that as a business leader, he's probably even being courted by some of those political people, because we know that the business leaders do sometimes come after them, whether they are Democrat or Republican, trying to get their endorsement and their funds and all along those lines. So definitely, are you a native of this area, Durham, or did Charlotte call to you? Because I know Charlotte is one of our growing metropolitan areas, has been for a while, has all those great sports facilities and a lot of other things that draw people there. I've actually got a cousin that went to UNC Charlotte and never left. They got involved in the banking industry and a number of other industries, and they have been there ever since graduating. And I believe that was back in the early 90s.
So I've actually been in Charlotte now, Mark, for just coming up to 24 years. So I moved originally, lived in Illinois. It's where I was born and raised, and spent many years in that state. But quite honestly, got tired of the cold winters and the gray clouds, and came to Charlotte. Absolutely the best move we've made as a family. So we are grateful to be here.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I know that in the show, we've definitely talked about leadership things, and definitely even one that Steve just mentioned earlier. But as a leadership coach, and as one that is even doing some of the hiring and helping people with the hiring processes, I think both big and small companies, probably even some of the medium-sized companies, how is the impact of a couple of things going? Because I know yesterday we talked about the pay gap, and there was some conversation as to whether the pay gap between men and women and some of the ethnic groups actually exist. You're in the leadership space, so I'd love to hear your take on that. And as Steve just talked about, the notion of AI replacing jobs has also come up, and that has been a fear of many people, particularly those that are in blue collar kind of work and those that are in service industry. So if you definitely want to take them maybe one at a time. So if you want to take the pay gap first, as that was a conversation that we were talking about on yesterday toward the end of the show, and then the AI conversation as well.
Absolutely. Those are two really great topics and very pertinent to many conversations that are taking place today, regardless of size of the company. We work primarily in the small and mid-sized market. So even with that, I still have a lot of conversations with leaders, in the enterprise level of companies. And quite honestly, I mean, we still continue to see, the pay gap, and that really continues to be a real issue that leaders are trying to figure out how to solve for. And I think that what's really interesting is you look back over the the years, that gap has been in many cases has been a lot wider in the past and where we are today. So as we look at the progress that's being made, there is progress and positive progress. It's helping to close that gap up in some areas. But as you know, there are many areas where the pay gap is still pretty significant, especially when it comes to the different cultures, different ethnic groups. There's still a lot of work to be done in those areas. But what I'm finding right now, Mark, as we look at how leaders are really focusing and addressing that, particularly since the pandemic, because I think a lot of the mindset on the way that leaders are leading their companies and the things that are really where their focus is being put today is on issues like this. And it ranges anything from the discrimination to the pay gap. And so we're seeing a lot of conversations from leaders and looking at their board of directors and looking at the resources that they have available on ways that they can actually focus in and actually implement processes that will close that gap. It's not something that's going to be closed today or tomorrow, but I think as we continue to trend and move in that direction, I think eventually we will get to that point where there is going to be parity.
One of the things that I've heard interesting, and particularly comes down to the gap with women, not so much the ethnic gaps and everything, is that sometimes it's cultural. So sometimes the women are not encouraged as much to ask for raises, and sometimes they have a harder time asking for raises and all along those lines. So I was wondering, as I was doing some research after our show yesterday, that did come up in a couple of conversations where it is not as easy for a woman to go ask for a raise as a man, or even to sometimes go for some of the executive jobs. So I was just wondering if you were finding something similar in your own work and everything, because I do know that culturally speaking, there is sometimes this notion of the women not being as aggressive in some of their business tactics. And sometimes if they are aggressive, they are called some negative names. I'll just leave it at that and everything.
No, and that's very true. And I think again, when you look back over the years and over the decades, I think that has definitely been the case for a lot of women in the workforce. And in many cases, that's actually prevented women from entering the workforce. But
Right.
I think that as we look at things to where we are today, I see that issue that continues. We continue to see evolution in that space as well, where women are becoming very involved in the workforce. They are being much more um, assertive in a lot of cases where they are bringing a different set of gifts and skills to the workforce and to companies, and they're adding great value to the organization. So they are able to take the the results that they have been able to produce over the last, over the few years. If you go back over the last 3 years, last 5 years, they're looking at those results and they're taking that to their leadership, and they're asking for those raises, and really being able to speak what their thoughts are and what what they believe the vision should be. So I see them taking on much more of a leadership role in organizations of all sizes as we move forward. And again, I think that's just going to be one of those areas that at some point we will see parity between men and women in the workforce.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Everything I'm going to bring in some of my other panelists as well. But one of the things that I know Steve had alluded to earlier, and it is a concern among a number of folks, is the rise of AI and the rise of other kinds of technologies along those lines. So I was just wondering, how much is that playing into your conversation with the corporations that you are working with, and how much is that a fear of some of the employees as well? Because I do know that if you are working at, say, at McDonald's, or if you're working at even a corporate company like Glaxo, SmithKline, or some of the other corporate companies, that there is still a fear that AI may eventually take your job and all along those lines. So I just wondering how much of that is a conversation that you are having with the various clients that you have.
Mark, we're seeing that depending on the level of the employee within the organization. We're seeing that a lot of concern in that space right now. And obviously AI is, I mean, from what we see right now from Chat GPT and the different platforms that are actually available right now, we're seeing just a lot of benefit. A lot of people are really intrigued by what, the capabilities that it has. What we don't really have full clarity on is really what is the evolution? What's that going to look like a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And what's the end result of AI going to be? There's no question that in a lot of areas that it will replace jobs as we move forward. But on the flip side, just as other technology platforms have done in the past, when we see changes like that, it's going to replace certain jobs, but then it's going to create opportunity in other areas as well. And so it's just going to require different skill sets for people to be able to to be able to stay in front of that curve if they can. And so what I'm seeing right now within our clients and specifically in the small and mid-sized business community is you look at from a market, I guess really departments that focus in on marketing, on sales, really on content creation. We're seeing AI and Chat GPT and things like that really having a big impact, and it's really being seen in a positive way right now. But again, what we are not really we don't have real clarity around is how many jobs are actually going to be replaced as we move forward. So that's an unknown right now, something that everybody is concerned about and is watching very closely.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know one of the other things that people have been thinking about, not just here, but in Canada, in France, and in a number of other places, is the nature of the executive versus the employee kind of conversation as well. Because we know there have been a lot of labor discussions. There was the whole strike that went on in Canada. There was what went on with Hollywood and is going on still with Hollywood and everything. So just wondering, from your standpoint as a consultant, are you working with both sides of the aisles, if I can use that term? I just used the political one earlier. Or are you kind of like finding yourself more on the executive side, or are you able to have this conversation with your company, Whitewater, with both the workers and the executives? Or how does the Whitewater situation work in those conversations? Because I do know that even here in North Carolina, there are a number of labor activists and union activists and all in that space.
Mark, I'm a firm believer in in so many different areas of our society today, it seems like you're either with us or you're against us. There's two sides to every issue or every part of society, and I'm one of those that I'm kind of in the middle. I'm trying to bring parties together. I'm trying to bring people together to have conversations around really sensitive topics and things that are of real interest and of importance to both sides. So with the work that we get to do as a consultant with Whitewater Consulting, we are really spending time at the executive level, but as part of our process, we also are drilling down into the organizations to be able to have very similar conversations with their mid-level managers, their frontline employees, all the way to their customers and to their clients, so we can have a comprehensive view as to what's really happening from top to bottom within that organization. And then we're highlighting and are spotlighting specific areas that we feel like from an HR perspective that really need to be addressed. And to be able to come up with the best solutions for that company, it requires both sides, the executive level and the employee level. It requires both parties to be able to have input into those solutions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If you can just tell us really quickly, and then we'll bring Lee Newton Rhodes, who comes in from a accounting background, and Jacoby, who comes in from a gaming background, as well as Sasha Starr, who comes in from various backgrounds. He is an investor. He's also involved in the chess world and is of Ukrainian descent, so he definitely has been following that war very closely and everything. But what got you to start Whitewater, and what was the driving impetus behind this particular company of yours and everything? And did you start it here or did you start it in Illinois? So what was the driving reason that you saw that there was a need to have this particular company? And is it a worldwide company? Because I know that you are based here in North Carolina, but I'm thinking your clients may even be in Dubai and other parts of the world. So how extensive is it as an organization, and what got you to start the organization?
So the way that we actually started, Mark, it was essentially Whitewater Consulting is ultimately a roll up of the services and my experience of being in a leadership role at the ownership level of 6 different organizations over the last 25 years. So it really has allowed me to take the experience and the skills that have been developed really going back to probably the early 1990s, and we rolled everything up into the formation of Whitewater Consulting. And so my real passion, my heart is really to serve and support entrepreneurs and small and mid-sized business owners. And really at the end of the day, our purpose is really to help them navigate the journey of being an employer. And by doing that, our ultimate goal is, as we work through evaluations and analysis with them, is to be able to help put in place processes and procedures that will ultimately lead to the business owners and their people having clarity and peace of mind as it relates to HR solutions for the company. And by having the right people strategy and the right people in place, it really helps help enhance or improve the odds of success and being able to accomplish the mission and the vision of their company.
That makes a lot of sense. There's been a rise in entrepreneurship definitely during the pandemic. So I was wondering if you've been seeing yourself get more clients during this time, because definitely we saw a rise of entrepreneurship. A lot of people that were forced to go into gig jobs and all along those lines because their main job might have been put on hold or other reasons that was happening and everything. So I just wondered if you could speak to that, because it does seem like there is a rise across the board and across ethnic divides across. I think there's been a rise in women entrepreneurs and a rise among a lot of other sectors as well. So could you speak to that need for the entrepreneurship boost, for lack of a better term, and if that's something you're seeing in your company?
Absolutely. So what's really interesting, Mark, I mean, the work that we do, I mean, we are simply focused on the U.S. When you go from the U.S. to Europe and to other countries, the labor laws and the HR laws and requirements change and they vary greatly from country to country. So we really focus in just on the U.S. only. That's our market, and that's really where we spend 99% of our time. But with regard to your question about entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship growth, every time when you look back over the years, every time we have an issue within a softening of the economy, and we go through corporate layoffs and we go through the pandemic, those moments create opportunities for people to really assess where they are as an individual, as we're really trying to evaluate where they are in their life as well, and what's really important to them. So we see a spike almost in every case in the number of companies and entrepreneurs stepping out and starting their own businesses.
And I've got my final point, and I want to thank Chuck for being on. Is we often forget that, at least in North Carolina, for every company that we create about 5 jobs. So our Secretary of State said we incorporated about 450,000 jobs, or all these companies were started right after COVID. So I think that startups can actually create jobs faster, and I think with a lot of job loss, you could have a spinoff of entrepreneurs, particularly in North Carolina in our RTP area, the tech sector. So you see companies like Red Hat, for example. There's a lot of entrepreneurial companies that are coming out of Red Hat, and we're seeing a lot of AI companies now emerging. All of a sudden, on the uptick, I've seen lots of these AI companies coming in. Venture capitalists looking at how AI can fit in to a business model. So I think it's a good time for entrepreneurs. Of course, my forte is in the tech sector, but I think all in all, I think it's really going to be great. But I want to thank you for being a guest on the show, and I've got to be a parent and have Sasha give a Russia briefing.
Yeah, I was going to do that in a little bit, and everything's definitely going to do that as well.
Thank you, team. Be safe.
Bye.
Yeah. See, we're definitely going to get to that as well. Hey, Chuck, just really quickly, and then, like I said, you can stick around. I know the other panelists may have questions for you as well, but I kind of alluded to it earlier, and I was just wondering, as a business leader, do you try to stay out of the political fray? Because I do know that we've had some very contentious races here in North Carolina as well as other places, and they are oftentimes, as I alluded to, trying to recruit and lobby the business leaders to come to their side one way or the other. And I was just wondering if you are able to do that, and if you're able to do it, how you're able to do it, if you're able to stay out of those political frays, or do you try to make a decision as to who is best for your own viewpoint and all along those lines? So I do know that a lot of times folks will get drawn into the political fires, whether they want to or not.
I don't intentionally jump into that fire on purpose. I do find myself a lot of times, so Mark, as we're talking with groups and different organizations in the state of North and South Carolina, we find ourselves in the middle of those conversations from time to time. As I mentioned earlier, I'm all about trying to bring people together. So I spend the majority of my time asking questions, listening to the responses from both sides. Obviously, I have my own perspectives, my own opinions, but whenever I'm serving as a consultant to my clients specifically, I'm not there to impose my beliefs or my thoughts on them, because I'm there to help them navigate their world of running their business. So the focus is simply on my clients and their people, and helping them to achieve their greatest results. But as it comes back to the political spectrum, I've watched both parties over the years since the 1980s very closely, and I find it so interesting that we still have the same talking points on both sides of the aisle today that we had 40 years ago. So with that, again, I don't position myself on one side or the other. I'm very much a middle of the road, or a moderate, based off of the issue that we're discussing. But when it comes back to business, there are pros and cons to both sides, and it's a matter of both parties really coming together to work together for the good of the American people, not for the power and the control over their party.
Hey, Chuck, along those same lines, and then, like I said, definitely want to open it up to other folks as well. But I know that on this show and other shows, there have been conversations where some people are feeling that corporations are being forced to kind of like take a position one way or the other on social issues, and that is part of the conversation. So I was wondering, as an executive coach, is that something that you have to navigate as well? Because I do know that there have been definitely times that corporations have been pressured to take a stand, or even been criticized because they didn't take a stand on the various issues, whether it was race issues, whether it was LGBT issues, or a number of other things. So I know that has got to be a conversation that comes up even in the meetings with the executives, because there's this whole notion of equity and inclusion that is oftentimes even whole offices that have been created, and those officers used not to exist, but they do exist in many corporations now. So how much of that is a conversation that you have to have as a executive coach and even dealing with? Because I do know that is a conversation that has thrown a lot of people into various lights, both negative and positive. But I was just wondering your take on that.
Yeah, that is such a hot button issue right now, and I just had this conversation with a couple of business owners yesterday. One, and the reality is there is a desire for a lot of business owners, and particularly those in the C-suite, not to step out and to voice their opinion or to take a position on that. However, when you're in a larger company, particularly at the enterprise, or you're, a well-known organization, I mean, you can look at, some of the companies that have been in the news over the last couple of months where they've taken a position and there's been a real severe backlash to that. And honestly, when I talk to small and mid-sized business owners, they don't want to find themselves in the middle of those kind of issues and those challenges. But so I think that part of the things that they're having to do is, number one, is they're working. A lot of them are working with communication consultants to really come up with a strategy on how they will deal with those issues. Number two, those business owners are also having a lot of conversations now with their people, talking about the topics, talking about the issues in-house, and trying to help really develop a psychological safe place for the employees to be able to voice their ideas and their concerns. So they're trying to keep a lot of that in-house if they possibly can. But as we look at the younger generations coming into the workforce, there is more of a push and not a demand, but more of a push for them to associate themselves or align themselves with companies that have very similar positions that they have. And so they're seeking that input from their business leaders and the companies that they're interviewing with, trying to understand if there is alignment there on those social issues. And again, that's putting the business owners in the C-suite in really difficult positions today that they're not accustomed to being. And as we've all seen, if you don't have a plan and a process in place, when you communicate, you can cause a bigger firestorm than the one that was initially created.
What do you think is the number one reason that businesses fail? I know that Sasha's in the investment space and has definitely seen a lot of businesses, some that he invests in and everything. But what, Chuck, do you find is the number one reason that businesses are failing in 2023, those that aren't making it?
And so when you look back, Mark, when you look back at the number of businesses that have started since the pandemic, there's a lot of people that jumped in and started their own companies. I think one of the big reasons that companies fail is they don't really have a real well-developed and designed business plan on how they're going to move forward. They have an idea, or they have basically a thought on something they believe would be important and good for the market, but they haven't really done a lot of market studies to determine whether or not that product or service is really going to add value and going to be something that's going to be accepted in the marketplace. And so I think that we need, in some cases, I want to encourage entrepreneurs that have ideas and have products. I want them to launch, and I want them to be successful. But at the end of the day, you've got to have some people around you that have got some experience on how to start and implement and develop companies over time so that they can become more successful.
That makes a lot of sense. Hey, Lee and Tovi and even Sasha, any questions that you have for Chuck? I know we'll get to some of the other issues. I definitely want to hear from Sasha about Ukraine and everything, but any questions that y'all have for Mr. Cooper and all along those lines as to what he's been talking about. So I open up the floor to my other esteemed panelists.
Tovi, you're muted, but let's go alphabetical. You go first today. Okay. Well, Chuck, I mean, in your experience, because I know there are a lot of entrepreneurs trying to figure out which pathway to go from C Corp, LLC, all the different routes to take. In your, I guess, in your opinion, which path have you seen to be kind of the most, well, I guess the one that is toughest to travel?
Yeah, I think when it comes toughest to travel, I think so much of the way that you structure the company from a compliance standpoint, and from a legalities perspective, I think a lot of those companies that formed as a C corp. I mean, those are really really difficult to be able to navigate. I think what we're seeing a lot of, because again, the community that I work within are really companies that have anywhere from say 10 to 15 employees up to maybe 500 employees. So most of them, as they started out, they were really they started up as a sole proprietor or an LLC in many cases. And then as our company grew and they began to develop, then we start to see them transition into the S Corp. And then ultimately some of those companies will eventually end up as a C Corp. But it's just one that, it's just a natural progression that we see through depending on the size and the scope of the organization.
Yep.
I got a couple questions. First, welcome to Pod TV. And I agree with you in terms of the political scene, both parties, nothing ever gets done. It tells me that's their plan, not to get things done. Putting that issue aside, in terms of the pay gap, on a global level, I agree with you, there's a pay gap between men and women. But I think when you drill down to the data, in terms of number of years of experience, in terms of professions, educational, like kindergarten teachers versus brain surgeons, I don't really believe there is. But my question for you is, for those leaders out there who believe there are pay gaps, why don't they just pay them the same and just get rid of it? That's one. And two is, why should an employer pay more than they need to get an employee to take a job and perform well?
And I think that answers the question right there. I think as a business owner, you're looking at that. Why, your ultimate goal, the number one KPI most business owners look at for decades has been, what's our profitability? And so we want to look at what is the market going to require us to pay and how much are we willing to pay. And so that's where their focus has simply been. There hasn't been a lot of focus over the years on, as a business owner, I know that I need to pay women just as much as I pay men for doing exactly the same job. That has not been the case, and they haven't been required to do so. But what I'm seeing today is we're seeing, particularly in larger companies, we're seeing more women taking on that leadership role and actually moving into the C-suite, moving on to the board of directors of organizations. And there, particularly at the C-suite, we are starting to see that there is still a gap. But again, I believe that gap is continuing to close in those areas. Now, at the lower level, at the whether you're talking the teacher level or in education, hospitality, there is still a wide pay gap in there. And the reason for that is businesses just have not been forced to be able to pay, have equity in the way that they compensate their people.
Hey, Chuck, just really quick, and I think Sasha may have a question as well, but what are some of the businesses that you were working in? Because you mentioned that before you started Whitewater, you had been successful in several businesses. So I just wondered if you can name what those businesses were and what industries they were in and everything. And were you one that did a lot of investment, whether it was in your own business or other businesses as well? Because I do know that Sasha is in the investment space and all in that world. So I was just wondering your own thoughts as to what kind of businesses you were working in, and if you can name them, that would be wonderful. But if you can't, I can understand that as well.
Yeah, I would just share with you the industries. I mean, it's a pretty wide range. It started off in the agriculture industry. Growing up in the Midwest, agriculture was that was probably the largest industry where jobs were. So we had a couple of businesses in the ag industry, which transitioned ultimately into financial services, which has led to hospitality. and now to the HR consulting arena. So that's kind of been my journey. We're still involved in the hospitality industry as well as the the consulting side, but we still have a lot of resources and relationships within the other industries that we've been a part of. So I just think that I love the different industries we've been involved in. I love working with those small and mid-sized businesses. They've got such a challenge day to day where they really don't know what's about to hit them when they walk in their office, when they arrive at work. So I see the changes that are happening in our society today. It's going to continue to come at us faster and faster, and helping business leaders to become agile and to be able to be adaptable is going to be critical for their success.
Speaking of the hospitality industry and being adaptable, I have seen in that industry that there has been a pickup in some of the specialty hospitality industries. I know that boutique hotels, we have one here in Durham, 21C, that is very popular and all along those lines. And of course, there are some bed and breakfasts here as well and everything. So I'm just wondering, is that a newer trend that we are seeing, that even in the hospitality industry, there is a scaling down, for lack of a better term, and that it is more of that personal kind of touch? Because when I think of boutique hotels and I think of the bed and breakfasts, they are more personal than, say, a Holiday Inn or a bigger chain and all along those lines. But I was just wondering, is that a push that we are seeing in that industry from your assessment?
Yeah, I think, Mark, when it comes to that question, again, when you look at the people that are in the marketplace right now, those are going to be customers. I think the younger generations from the Gen Z and particularly the millennials, they're all about the experience. And so they are willing to be able to utilize those boutique hotels, those Airbnbs, the VRBOs. I mean, we're seeing businesses created in that space, very regularly right now. But I see that those type of businesses that are able to offer a more impactful experience to their customers is something that is very attractive to the marketplace. And so I think you're going to continue to see that area continue to grow very significantly.
Well, another industry you mentioned you were part of as well is seemed to have almost gone in the opposite direction, because I know that when I think of the agrarian industry, particularly in the United States and in the West, there seems to be a rise of some small farms, and definitely there are small farmers that are doing well and definitely producing products, because there's that whole farm to home kind of thing that is going on. But at the flip side of that, there is a lot of very big corporations that are pushing these small farmers out and all along those lines. So just wanted your take on the agrarian industry, because I've definitely seen the push to encourage small farmers to do the farm to home kind of businesses, and they seem to be in some cases doing quite well. But I've also seen a number of farms that are threatened by the larger corporate farms that exist and everything.
That is exactly the dichotomy that there is in the grain industry today. Is those small farmers, if they try to stay just farming and raising grain, they're going to have a really, really difficult time being able to make it, just simply because of the costs and the input costs, as well as the equipment costs to be able to maintain that farm. But if you transition that from a grain farmer to a specialty crop, and go to the farm to table, we're seeing a lot of businesses, even in North Carolina, we're seeing a lot of businesses that are really being very successful doing that. But when you go back to the Midwest, and again, I kind of take from, really from my background, going from really the states of Ohio over through Illinois, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, you're seeing a lot of those farmers in those areas. The big farmers continue to grow, and they're continuing to buy land as fast as it will come up for sale, meaning that the small farmers are just, they're going out of business. And so it's really, in today's world, it's difficult to be able to make a living as a small farmer in the Midwest. And it's really hard for the next generation to be able to come in and take over and to really start from ground zero. It's almost impossible for them to get started.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
I guess this is a really tough question in the sense, because all the industries that you've been across, I'm kind of asking for generalities across those industries. And in terms of an ROI, what for these small to mid-sized businesses, what generalities have you seen in terms of best ROIs out there? Like, is it a return on investment with the individuals in education? Is it through dealings with, at marketing? Is that the best? I mean, what are some generalities that you can give us that help industries be successful, especially in that small to mid-sized range?
So when I look at that, if I were to take that question and put it in perspective, looking at things at the world today, I think where the greatest return on investment is investing in your people. And I think technology is critically important, but at the end of the day, no matter what type of technology you're utilizing, you've got to have people there to be able to drive it and to have an impact with it. And so I think that when you look at companies that are really big, that are thriving today, they are companies where the leadership has recognized the importance and the value of their people. And they're looking at ways that they can basically build, taking the executive level and the employees, instead of having an us versus them debate within organizations all the time. They're looking at ways being able to build bridges back to their people, establishing trust, establishing communications, connecting with them, developing relationships. And by doing that, we're seeing the ripples that come from that are having major impacts, not just on the business, but on the lives of their employees, the communities that they live in and that they work in, as well as the states that they're a part of. And I think that's one of the reasons that North Carolina has been very, very fortunate in the fact that we've been the number one state for business 2 times over the last 2 years, based on CNBC's rankings, which I think is a great testament to the entrepreneur community that we have here in the state.
Hey, Chuck, how important do you think it is for businesses to be involved in their community? Because I know that is a conversation that goes on as well. I know that there's been even conversations where some people feel that their economic wealth or their economic money leaves their community faster than in other communities and all along those lines. But how important do you think it is for a business to have some roots in where they are based?
I think today, moving and looking forward, I think it's absolutely critical that they have great connections, great relationships with their community, and that they see themselves as being an integral part to the success of that community. Because I think that is where, again, that's where from the employees and them finding ways that they can be engaged, and finding ways that the employees can feel fulfilled and feel like the purpose that they have is being played out in an area that's really making an impact. It starts with the company, but then ultimately it goes to the community. And I think as business leaders, we have to be able to communicate and be able to develop those relationships, both with our internal stakeholders as well as with our external stakeholders. And the external stakeholders include those others that are investors, but also the community leaders and state leaders that where we actually reside. So I think it's going to be mission critical for them as we move forward.
Sounds really interesting.
We've been very serious throughout the whole show. So, I've got to break it up. I got to break up the seriousness. On your website, you made only one reference to a sport, which was golf. Now I am curious, what is your handicap?
My handicap is a couple of things. One is lack of talent. And 2 is I had a shoulder injury a few years ago playing golf. And my doctor told me that my driving and long iron game was over. Now I can pitch and putt, but that's about it. So, but you're right. You're exactly right. I only reference golf and in a very strategic way. But I have to say, probably my favorite time of the year is coming up, starting in a couple of weeks as college football gets started.
Oh, who's your team?
So growing up in the Midwest, Illinois, I mean, obviously I grew up in Illinois. So Illinois was my team for many years. But when we moved to Charlotte 24 years ago, I decided to cut ties with that and picked up and became a huge fan of Clemson. So I'm orange through and through.
And Chuck, along those same lines, one of the things that happens a lot of times in the business community, I was actually watching a crime show because I like to watch those on a regular basis. And there was this notion of golf. And I know that to some degree tennis, but tennis is harder, being kind of the businessman's crutch, that a lot of the business deals are done on the golf course and everything. So how much of that is a reality and how much of that is mythology? Because I'm thinking that you could probably make some really good deals, Sasha can correct me, on a chess set and all along those lines. But how important is it to make some deals on the golf course and everything? And is that the go-to for a lot of these business deals that you are making and everything?
There is no question. It's not a myth. There's a lot of business deals. A lot of money gets exchanged on the golf course, without question. Even though I don't play much anymore, when I think back over the last 25, 30 years, there has been some of my best deals that I've closed have been on the golf course. Some of my opportunities in business to be able to be able to get some favors and get some things put in place that I really needed from my suppliers that I had, it was done on the golf course. So I think just being able to have an opportunity to sit side by side with somebody for 4 hours in a setting like that, it's amazing the relationships that are formed. But more importantly, it's a lot of business actually does get finalized, in that 18 holes.
Sounds like. Sasha, any thoughts about that? Have you closed any business deals on the chessboard? And do you have any questions for Mr. Cooper as well?
Okay, I have a question. Chuck, could you tell me, what is, in your opinion, a rate of failure in small business generally accepted?
Oh, for what time period, Sasha?
1 year, 5 years?
That's fair.
It's and this is where I think that there's a great opportunity, because I think that when you look at the number of businesses that fail in year one, it's probably if I had to guess, it would probably be something in the area of 75, maybe 80%.
Make it 95.
Pardon?
Make it 95, but that's okay.
Make it 95. Okay.
Great.
And then when we get to, if you're looking at 3 years or 5 years, company, that still remains a very, very high number. Even at that point, I think probably that the numbers are probably still in that 80% plus range in that time frame.
So Chuck, would the numbers be different? I'm sorry. Would the numbers be different if you pulled out restaurants?
It probably, when you look at the scope, the overall scope, it may have a slight impact on that, but I don't think that it's going to change the overall percentage significantly at all.
The only thing about restaurants, Lee, please be aware that restaurants run by Greeks, they're staying in business much longer. Well, they're failing anyway, but their staying power is incredible. So
why is that, Sasha? Why is that? Do you know?
Because Greeks are working 18 hours a day with all their family and so on. And if people know that in this place there was a restaurant run by Greek and it's closed, never, ever touch that place, never even think about opening restaurants because of the.
But don't a lot of immigrants have that mentality?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
but
so
however, wait a sec.
Go ahead.
I haven't finished yet. Chuck, are you aware of the book published several years ago, Why Son of a Bitches Succeed and Nice Guys Fail in Small Business? That book was published several years ago by, I think it was Princeton University or John Hopkins University. And that explained the small business. It can survive only because of the owner, the founders. There is no board of directors. There is nothing of these institutions effective there. It's an owner. And the more skillful he is, the more entrepreneurial he is, and the more son of a bitch he is, the greater chances for him to succeed. So nice guys, including women and so on, they are failures in small business by definition because they cannot act as the son of a bitches. They could be daughters of the bitches, but that's a different animal, okay? The son of a bitches will never pay invoice on time. He will pay
Family-friendly show.
6 months later, never. He will conserve and cash flow of the business, which is a lifeblood of small business. He will preserve it as much as he can. He will manipulate and fire, for example, he will hire temporary workers with some kind of a condition that in 2 months they will get a real job definition and salary or so on. But if he will be fired in 2 months, there is nothing in it. There is no unemployment, there is insurance, nothing. So in exactly 7.5 weeks, these people are let go. So he doesn't have to pay severance pay, nothing. So he can fire somebody else. And by the way, another problem is in small business that people are not going in that small business because they desire, most of them, of course, because it's necessity for them. They are unemployable otherwise. So they want to be employed by their own business, but most of them don't have idea even what it is to run a small business. They don't understand that. So it's a failure rate, 95% or more. That's a reality. So if you're consulting small business, I'm wondering what percentage of your clients do understand what they are involved. On the other hand, I would like to mention that the failure of the small businesses, and so many people are going on the street unemployed, this is great for United States of America, because right now there is a huge inflation of workers' wages, and that drives interest rates higher. This is impede U.S. economy. You need a pool of available workers. Where do you want to get that pool? You're not allowing immigration to the United States. Where are you going to find people? So unemployed people who have been fired, it's a great source of workplace force. And so we have to appreciate that it's not so bad when people are let go.
So Chuck, welcome to meeting our drunk uncle.
No, I got a quick question for you based on what he just said, and we've got Nick with us, the founder and everything. But I do have a quick question based on what Sasha just said, and we've got Nick with us, who is the founder of the network, and all along those lines. But this is my quick question for you, Chuck, and everything, and it kind of alludes to what Sasha just said in that whole conversation that he gave you and everything. But when you are doing your consulting, there is a group of folks that sometimes you have to go to in order to get investments. And this becomes a difficult question because I have heard some friends that are of Greek descent, Italian descent, and sometimes you have to get your money from, let's just say, less than scrupulous sources and all in that space. So I was just wondering how, when you are doing your consulting, how much do you have that conversation? Because I do know some folks that have realized that maybe their uncles got some money from the drug culture or the mafia culture, and they have to get their investments, and they decide to get the investment from those sources, knowing that that is where they are coming from. So as a consultant, is that something that you ever have to deal with? And if so, how do you deal with that? Because I've had some incidences where folks have gone like, hey, look, if it's going to help me create my business, I'm going to create it, and I will turn the blind eye to where I think the money is coming from. But I was just wondering, as a consultant, your take on that.
You know, the great thing about what I get to do is all my focus is really on the people side of the business. Obviously, what we're talking about here is more on the financial side. And so I leave the financial piece, you know, to the CFO and to the C-suite for them to maneuver and to make decisions based on the data that they have. Again, my focus is simply on the people side, helping make sure they've got a strong foundation, you know, for them to be able to add to the value of their company. So I don't get directly involved in raising of funds and the VCs and working with private equity groups. We have relationships there, but I don't get directly involved in teeing my clients up, referring them to them.
Yeah,
Chuck, would you refuse a client if their money was getting by, let's say, ill-gotten ways that you want?
So if I knew that, if I knew where the money was coming from, I will say that I would not say directly that I would do it just based on that. However, I will say this. I am very, very cautious on who I say yes to as far as taking on a client. And if there are things that don't match up with my mission, my vision, my values, I'm just going to politely and respectfully decline. I will definitely refer them to someone that I believe can be a great help to them. But I'm not going to
Authority.
So I
Law
you're
authorities.
not play in the live tournament. That's what I'm hearing.
No, that is very true.
It seems like a good thing. Hey, Nick, you're here. You joined.
Yeah.
Chuck is with us. Chuck has got Whitewater Consulting, which does a lot of HR consulting and a lot of other things with small to medium businesses. And he's actually just down the road from us. So he's down in
you're
Charlotte,
welcome.
even though he's originally from Illinois. So we've been having a very lively discussion about the nature of business and a lot of those other kind of things. And you've been in the business space. You're a pension attorney and everything. And some people tease you on this network for being a trust fund baby. I have no idea what that term even means and everything, but they tease you about that and all along those lines. But any thoughts that you have just about business in general, and maybe you have some questions for Chuck about Whitewater Consulting.
Well, let's just go talk about trust funds in general, since I grew up with that whole thing because my great grandfather founded a company called Bank One, and no one's familiar with it. It was a big bank in Ohio that eventually was
Yes.
bought by J.P. Morgan Chase, and we end up with tons of Chase stock in our trust. Okay, but 40 years ago when I started law practice, I started creating trusts for wealthy clients in Fort Myers, Naples, Boca Raton, and Palm Beach. Those were our 4 cities where our law firm. And we did thousands of trusts. Today, if you go to Boca Raton, Palm Beach, Naples, and Fort Myers, almost everybody knows about trust. The reason why the people on this show don't know, they don't grow up in that social circle. But if you do, they all know about trust. They have trust, they have land trust, trust out the gazoo. They have the Illinois land trust is famous. Florida has a land trust statute, but you also have revocable living trust, grant or retained annuity trust. It's a way to transport money from one generation to the next. And I'm talking serious money so that your heirs are also wealthy. Okay. Now, as I tease Shaq when he comes back on, not only a trust fund baby, I'm also descendant of royalty, actually a direct descendant of the King of France, King of England, and the King of Portugal. So he can kiss my bloody ring. The real problem with this, and a lot of people don't know this because you didn't grow up with a lot of money, is that the reason you don't sit on thrones is one of the people in my antecedents was a female. And females basically get kicked out. And they have what they call primogeniture. Only the oldest male gets the money, which is one reason Harry, remember him, Prince Harry, who no relation, I believe, because he's from the House of Windsor. Mine was the House of Plantagenet. Plantagenets and Windsors didn't get along, but he doesn't inherit, well, he doesn't inherit the throne because he's not the eldest male. Mm-hmm. All right, now if you go to the University of Miami, where I went to law school at, they have the largest estate planning seminar in the world. 3,000 attorneys a year go to this mecca of trust. By the way, there's offshore trust, British Virgin Island trust, Malta trust. So why are we bathing in such a sea of ignorance when the vast majority of wealth is held in trust? Period. The end. Now in Raleigh-Durham, where we happen to live, it's not. And I explain to people. Everybody goes, "Oh, well, they have a research triangle." They don't have research triangle money. The fact is, in venture capital, and you go look it up, 40% of all startup money comes from Silicon Valley area, 10% in LA, 10% in Boston. The great Raleigh-Durham, and they think a lot of themselves, 0.07%. They only have 1% of the market share. The fact is, North Carolina is a poor southern state, just barely ahead of Alabama and Mississippi. They just don't want to admit it. So, and we do have some growing companies like SAS and Epic Games, as Jatovi knows, that have done quite well, but not even close comparison to Seattle and Silicon Valley. We're not even in the same ballpark. And entrepreneurs that have money will feed other companies that have money. And that's where I get into examples like Peter Thiel, Bill Gates. we basically don't have anybody like that. So my recommendation, if you're looking for money, leave North Carolina, go to Silicon Valley. That's what Zuckerberg did. That was smart. Frankly, that's what Steve Jobs did. A lot of people go to Silicon Valley. And if you want to be successful, get the heck out of North Carolina. Go to Southern California.
Hey, Nick, you say that, but there are organizations that actually help with the economic development, because actually Mom ran one of those organizations, and technically it might have been considered almost a trust fund. And of course, she retired some 10 years ago, but I'm sure that Chuck is familiar with the Golden Leaf Foundation, and my mother actually was the first president of that particular foundation for a number of years. So that was the tobacco settlement money and all in that space. So, and part of their drive, I'm sure that you probably even had some clients, Chuck, that went for that, is Economic Catalyst. So I'm thinking that you might have applied for them, as well as Z. Smith Reynolds, which he also worked for, and a number of those other organizations. So how much do you use those catalyst programs? And that's just one of those. There's also the because I knew the founder of that, and I think they changed the name, but it's now the North Carolina Institute. It used to be the North Carolina Minority Economic Institute, and all in that space. But how much do you go to those organizations to try to raise money for the organizations that you are working with and consulting?
Again, that's one of those areas, Mark, that when it comes to the financial side, I just don't get involved in that. That's outside of my area of expertise, and I leave that to the other really the other consultants or the other resources that the entrepreneur has available or has access to. So I as much as I'm happy to try to connect people from my clients to organizations like that. That's not where my area of expertise is. So I try to stay in my own lane.
Yeah, and that's good also, because Chuck, like my business partner and my pension company, never comes on any of our shows. Neither does any of the people that work in my company, because they are securities licensed. The minute you're securities licensed, 665, 7, 24, 26, everything you say has to be cleared by your broker dealer, basically. And so they shy away from being on any shows. So the minute you said that, I know one thing: you're not securities licensed. Okay, because otherwise, even being on this show could be problematic for you.
Absolutely.
Okay. So because the SEC takes a dim view on how funds are raised, what you say, and then most people that are securities licensed also have a broker dealer. They have to clear all their trades through, and the broker dealer also has a duty to supervise their producers. So it's really complex. But if you have somebody securities licensed, they're less, they can't say anything. It's basically, you can take your freedom of speech and throw it down the toilet.
And Nick, I know a few people who are licensed and they have podcasts. Why is that not a problem then?
Or are they securities licensed?
Yes.
And
yes. 63.7. Yeah.
And are they talking about financial matters?
The economy.
The economy. Okay. If they're talking about the economy in general, they're probably okay.
And generically, yeah.
And remember, they also have to clear it by their broker dealer, so they have to keep records of it, et cetera, by their BD. But if they're just talking about general economic topics and stuff like that, okay. But if they talk about, I've got a specific investment I'd like you to look at.
That's fair. They're not talking about that.
So Sasha does our Modern Investing show, okay? And he talks about a lot of pretty sophisticated stuff, from covered call writing to, puts and all that. But Sasha can do that because he's just trading his own account, and he's not securities licensed. Bingo. If he was securities licensed, Peter Bent does the same thing, but he's not securities licensed. If they're securities licensed, they got a big problem talking about specific recommendations. So,
by the way, I had a few comments.
You're free, Sasha, because you're not securities licensed. Think about that.
Free at last.
A few comments, including from people whom I know personally. So they are saying, how dare is he to teach us about investing? Why he's doing that, and so on. My answer is very simple. I'm not teaching anybody whatsoever. All I'm doing, I'm sharing with people what exactly I'm doing week from week, month to month, and that's all there is to it.
Oh, that's the SEC.
And number two, if you don't like...
Wait, he's in Canada, so the SEC has no jurisdiction.
Yeah, please don't listen to it. Listen to something
Nick,
else.
never stop the government.
Just any other program. And number three, In last 9 months, I've generated 190% profit in my investment
Okay,
portfolio.
so you can't
That's
even say
been
that
the
if you're
story.
securities licensed, because you have to say that past performance doesn't indicate future results.
I don't care.
And you have
Let
to put
any
disclaimers
idiot
all up and
think
down.
about what I'm saying,
You know,
anything what he wants. First of all, I always have
you're not selling
available.
anybody securities. You're okay.
Yeah, along those same lines, and everything, because it's about time to wrap
Okay,
up, and all along those lines.
Bye, everybody.
Chuck, Jacoby, you had a
By
question.
the way, his show's on later today. Modern.
Actually, I
Sure.
did, to get back to because I'm still actually picking Chuck's brain because I'm in the middle of starting a nonprofit anyway. So I'm kind of doing this. These questions are personal more so than general. In terms of, I guess, your dealings with businesses, how and dealing on the people side of things, though, have you found companies find success in grabbing individuals that were part of, I guess, the community that the grabbing individuals to work for the company that were based in the community that they serviced? Because I know Magic Johnson with his whole project, that's what he did when he tried to do the theater in LA, also some of the other places. So have you found for small to mid-sized businesses, have you found them having success doing anything similar?
Yeah, I'd see. We see that both on the nonprofit side as well as on the the other for-profit organizations that we work with. When they're looking for talent, that is one of the key things they're looking for is those relationships, that experience, and that is just when you take somebody out of that market, that's just a big asset that you can't find very often. So when you do identify them, that is a key person that you want to pick up.
Hey, along those same lines, Chuck, when you think of boards, because I've served on some boards, mostly nonprofit boards. Matter of fact, I think all nonprofit boards. But what, from a business standpoint, what should the board be made of? Because I've heard some people that say that you want an accountant, you want some community-based people, you want some lawyers that can help with the lawyer aspects. But then I've heard other people that are trying to find different sectors of the community to be on their board as well. So you mentioned boards a couple of times, and I know that's part of your research. So what do you think is the keys to making a good board, and is it important to have a board if you are a small business? Because I know that sometimes definitely nonprofits are full of boards, but I know that not all nonprofits have boards. So how important is it to have a board if you are a profit business?
As I think about that question, Mark, I think that having people on your board that bring that necessity from a legal perspective, from a financial perspective, I think having people like that it's very, very important that they do have resources on the board for them to have access to and to be able to draw from their expertise. But then, once you go away from the skill side and the experience side, then bringing on other people that kind of represent the community and looking at things based off of male, female, different ethnic groups, and having representation on the board. But I think you have to also look at, in addition to that, you have to look at the values of the organization. You have to look at kind of what the purpose and the mission of the organization is to really be able to define who are the right people to have in your board of directors or within your community. I personally don't believe that small and mid-sized companies really need to have a board of directors around them. I believe they need to have a community with a lot of those same types of resources available to them to use as a sounding board, to bounce ideas off of, to get input, to help serve as guardrails for them so that they don't make a life-changing mistake just simply because they didn't try to get outside counsel or wisdom from somebody else that's got great experience. So long story short, I think that on those companies that have a board of directors, they need people with the right skills, and they need to have a makeup that is very similar to the community that they service. And then two, from a small and mid-sized marketplace, again, that journey of being an entrepreneur and a business owner is not meant to be done alone. They need people around them to help make sure that they don't make some life-changing mistakes.
So you're thinking more of a board of advisors than a board of directors. I know some organizations have actually had both and all along those lines. And I know that even on some of the boards that I have served on, they believe in the 100% giving notion. But even with that, they will sometimes realize that if you can't give fiscally, that you can give service-wise. So sometimes they will bend the rules in order to let you fulfill that obligation without necessarily giving the money if you don't have the monetary resources. So that's something that I've also seen as well. But is that something that you think that most of these board of advisors should encourage, is making sure that the people that are involved with their board of advisors or board of directors are doing some sort of give back to the organization?
Yeah, I think if you're going to serve in a board capacity, whether it's an advisor or whatever that title is that comes along with it, I think they need to have some skin in the game, and they should they should believe in the mission and the vision of the organization. So if they're not doing those things, they really probably should not be on the board.
Yep, I agree. Getting ready to wind down. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. One of the things I was going to ask you, Chuck, is if you can tell folks how they can get in touch with you and any final words that you've got to share. And then you mentioned Charlotte. I know Charlotte is our big metropolitan area. So any insights or thoughts that you have about Charlotte, both as a business destination or just as a destination in general, I'm sure our audience would love to hear that globally, because we do have a global audience and not everybody is familiar with what is going on in Charlotte. Like I said, I've got relatives there, and I definitely try to make it down to a game on occasion, whether that is a Hornets game or a Panthers game. But definitely it is a fun and growing area. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about Charlotte, ways you can be reached, and any final thoughts that you have.
So probably the best way to get in touch. I'm readily accessible. I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the best social media platform to connect with me on. And then my website is whitewaterconsulting.net. Or you can feel free to email and reach out there, which is my personal email is chuck@whitewaterconsulting.net. And again, we respond to emails on a daily basis. So would love to be able to hear from a lot of the listeners and be glad to answer any questions that they may have. As it relates to Charlotte, as I mentioned early on in the show, my family and I have been in Charlotte now right at 24 years. We absolutely look at that decision to move to Charlotte as probably the best decision that we made as a family. And it has just been a great place to live and to raise a family, and to know that 2 of our 3 grown kids are still here with their families speaks to the quality of life that they've experienced. When you look at the business community here, it is a very, very vibrant and growing community. What I really love about it is the fact that we have people from all over the world. And, there's so many people here from different states that have moved here with the idea that, this is kind of a place for them to slow down or to retire, but they have found the business community one that has picked up and captured their interest, and they have stayed very engaged with that. So we have a growing entrepreneurial community, and we've got some pretty successful companies here that have, started off as very small startups that are now, billion-dollar companies. So it's really been fun to watch those journeys happen. And again, it is just a great place for young people to start their careers, and it's a great place for those of us that are more seasoned to be able to use our experience to help give back to the next generation of entrepreneurs.
Definitely. Well, like I said, I totally enjoyed having you on today on the World Edition. Hopefully, I know we were on the online dinner party as well, and hopefully we'll have you make a return trip in the not too distant future, but thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Hopefully we'll see you come back again and share some more of your business acumen and business knowledge, because I know that, like Jacoby said, he's in the process of getting his business started. So he was picking your brain and everything. And there are a number of other folks that listen that are often in the business space, and I'm even sometimes in the business space as well. So definitely enjoyed the conversation and hope that you will make a return trip in the not too distant future.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's been great to be with you all today. And Jacoby, it's great I appreciate your questions. Feel free to reach out if I can be a resource.
I'll be reaching out. I'll definitely shoot you an email.
Okay, that'd be great.
Sounds good. And he will return to the emails because we've definitely been in touch a few times, which is why we've had him on twice. So I know that Chuck will return that email. So if you send the email to Toby, you can expect a return email as well. So definitely that is going on. And by the way, Chuck, if you decide to come and visit the Triangle, I'm just going to give a plug for something else that Jacoby is involved with. He is the voice of the on-the-field antics that goes on, like the sumo wrestling and the running of the bull and a number of other contests for the Durham Bulls. So he also does some work for the Hurricanes on the field antics as well. So if you want to get to one of those games, or if you're one of those games, I'm sure he won't mind waving at you, or at least acknowledging that you were at the game and all along those lines. So he is definitely involved in that sports space and knows some of those business leaders, because that is a major corporation that runs both of those and all in that space. And as a matter of fact, I think they're associated with Capital Broadcasting, if I'm remembering correctly. Is that not right, Jacoby? Yep. So definitely he's got those ties to the sports world as well. So it's not quite a professional game in terms of the NFL or the NBA, which y'all have in Charlotte, but it's a fun AAA game, and definitely the Hurricanes is a professional league, and so definitely if you get a chance, I'm sure that they would not mind seeing you and your family at that particular venue, so whether it's the Raleigh venue or the Durham venue.
We will look forward to it.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you all so much.
No problem.